To give us the session on caring for self, leading others, and serving communities is our Associate Dean at the Ateneo School of Medicine and Public Health, and he is also a member of Pascom. Let us all welcome Dr. Baquiran.
Salamat, Eileen. Magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. No? So, nung anyayahan ako ni Cherry, sabi ko, Cherry, napakahirap naman yung assignment na ibinigay mo sa akin. No? So, tapos, pero dahil si Cherry ang aming haligi dito sa, isa sa aming mga haligi sa public health dito sa ASMPH, siyempre hindi ako makatanggi. No? Pero ang ibabahagi ko sa inyo ay mga pagninilay. No? So, nasa tema tayo ng pagninilay. So, ang paksa na ibinigay niya, pag-aalaga sa sarili, pamumuno sa iba at paglilingkod sa mga pamayanan ay isang malalim na tema o paksa at let me start by saying na what I will be sharing to the group is really a product of my own reflection. And maybe towards the end, during the open forum, sana meron kayong pagkakataon na magbahagi din ng inyong sariling pagninilay no, tungkol sa pag-aalaga sa sarili, pamumuno sa iba at pagtulong sa mga pamayanan. So I actually divided the talk into three parts. First is a description of who we are as medical educators, community health workers and learners. And here I also describe where we are coming or why we are medical educators in community medicine. So that's the first part. The second is a reflection on the question of why we serve and why we continue on doing what we're doing. So that's the second part. And then the third part, which I believe is an important part of the talk, is how do we sustain our desire to serve? So paano natin ipagpapatuloy ang ating pagnanais na makatulong sa iba? No? So in preparing for this talk, I actually asked Cherry for the profile of the participants of the 4 previous NILAY sessions. No? And she confirmed my initial sense of who we are in this group. No? So more than half are physicians, more than a quarter are community health workers, and then the remaining 20% are medical students. No? So I would hazard a guess that of the combined 80% health professionals and health workers in this webinar, a sizable majority are also educators teaching in various medical and health profession schools. Okay? I would therefore describe our group, the community gathered here for the 5 sessions of NILAY, as having 2 distinct attributes. No? So the first is a group that has an intense love and appreciation of community medicine. And the second, a group that has an immense love for teaching, no? Which is actually pursued in the context of the first. So that through teaching, we can share our passion for community medicine, or for community health. No? Sige, so bago ako magpatuloy, siguro isang katanungan lamang para dun sa grupo. No? So pwede nyo itong sagutin dun sa chat group, pero wag nyo munang pipindutin yung submit. No? Sabay-sabay natin sagutin. No? And my question is this. No? So if we were to ask ourselves, what experience led us to community health? Or how did we develop our love or passion for community health? No? So, tanungin natin to sa ating sarili, tapos subukan nating sagutin doon sa chat box. Pero wag niyo munang ipe-press yung send para sabay-sabay nating ma-press yung send. You can send your responses. Tingnan natin kung ano ang sagot ng ating mga participants sa webinar. Community immersion during pre-med. So, siguro yun yung isang common na experience. No? Meron pa bang iba? Wala na bang gustong sumagot? Outreach program, pandemic, impact of mental health of our sponsored youth and their families. And then some during the outreach program since elementary pa. No? So medyo mahaba. No? So malalim yung pinanggagalingan. It's not just recent pero madaming karanasan ng pinanggagalingan. No? So sige, tuloy tayo. No? So reflecting on these questions myself, no? So and then also drawing from the experience of peers and friends who are in the same field, I list here before you what are likely the compelling life experiences that has led us to choose community health and community medicine. No? So, una, as madami nagbanggit sa inyo, immersion. No? Immersion experience during your formative years. Yung iba as early as your elementary schools. No? Isa yon. Pangalawa is your personal experience of working as a community health professional or as a community health worker. So yun talagang direct yung karanasan bilang isang manggagawang pangkalusugan. At pangatlo, sa pagninilay-nilay, pagtatanong din sa ibang mga kasamahan, yung kanilang organizational experience of being part of an NGO or a civil society organization that's involved in community healthcare. Sige. So let me just stop share first and then just speak a little bit of my own personal experience. No, when I joined the immersion and exposure activities of the Office of Social Concern and Involvement, when I was a second-year undergraduate student, I believe it was a talk on social involvement given during one of our classes when I first met a very good friend, Tutsi Herrera, eventually a good friend. No? She was a registered nurse working as a community organizer, first in Calabuso, in Tagaytay, which is now unfortunately part of the Tagaytay Highlands. No? And subsequently, she worked in Tayabas, Quezon. No? So she challenged us to consider helping out in the work of training community health workers in the area. And somehow, three of us good friends found ourselves signing up. And as part of our preparations, we were introduced to another NGO worker named Sandra, who subsequently set us up for a one-week immersion in the farming community of Ilaya in Tayabas. And this was subsequently followed by a longer immersion in Irusin, Sorsogon, in the areas where the Lingap para sa Kalusugan ng Sambayanan, led by Dr. Eddie Dorotan, a group that was implementing an integrated community development plan that had community-based healthcare as its core. Okay. I have to admit, no, na part of my intentions for going to these places is less than pure. No? It was the adventurous traveler in me that wanted to see places that likely motivated me to go. I realized later on, however, that these trips and these experiences, living with the farmers of Quezon and Sorsogon, meeting them face-to-face, interacting with their lives, listening to their stories, were very transformative. I am certain that many of you had similar experiences going through exposure and immersion activities like these. Groups like ComMed or PLB, Pangkalusugan Lingkod Bayan, sponsored similar formative exercises. There are certainly many more other community-oriented student organizations that you can cite, and many other experiences that you can remember that likely planted that seed of community health in your hearts. And perhaps because of this formative experience during your student days, even during your young professional days, you found yourself taking on the leap of working as a community health worker. It was certainly a road less traveled, even up to now. Hence the reason why many of the professional posts for primary healthcare in government and even private settings remained unfilled. When I graduated from medical school, I do not remember doubting that I wanted to work with the urban arm of LICAS, the Health Dev Institute. Okay. I finished internship in May, took the board in August, and after a month's travel to Sagada to enjoy the freedom from internship, I was already a program officer by the end of September, working with friends in the NGO. Okay. My classmates were busy preparing for the residency training both locally and abroad, but I did not seem to have been carried by the winds. It didn't bother me that I was not going with the general flow of where medical graduates usually end up in. I was happy joining Health Dev, and from this platform, very pleased and confident to be a physician in our factory-based health program in Pasig and our community-based health program in Payatas and Montalban. working very closely with our likas student volunteers. Okay? Years after, when reflecting on why I chose to work for 5 years during my early professional life, I know that it was the community in Likas that played a strong influence in my choice. It was the people who I worked with, like-minded co-venturers supporting me in my work. It was also the people who I worked for in the community. The mothers who were our usual community health volunteers and volunteer paramedics who set aside time after their shift in the factory to work with us in the clinic. I have since gone to other pursuits, but my experience in community health keeps me grounded. I believe this is true for many of you who are here. Each one of you has a story to share about traveling by foot over the steep mountains to reach communities in need, or taking the long boat ride over cathedral high waves, hopping on top of the roof of the jeepney to catch the last ride back to town, or balancing yourself in a habal-habal or skylab. Each one of you has a story to tell about sharing the simple life of our farmers, fisher folks, and laborers. Each one also has a story of fear and anxiety for your safety, for being tagged by military and even civilian authorities, and maybe even personal experiences of being picked up, interrogated, and even incarcerated. In our first session, we talked about self-awareness. And part of that process is remembering these compelling life experiences and keeping the memories alive. They will sustain us in our desire to serve others, and they will help us in taking care of ourselves. Now, earlier, I mentioned to this group that there is a second attribute that characterizes us, and that is that of being a teacher. No? It is not difficult to see the connection, no? So between a community health or between community health and teaching, especially that of a health educator. No? To be a good community health worker, we need to be effective health educators too. We need to do this at different levels. When we are engaging an individual or family during a clinical consultation, when we act as resource persons on special topics for the community, okay, like COVID, for example, and when we talk about the necessary preventive measures we need to observe. We need to be good health educators also when we're talking in a radio show or in a webinar or in a general assembly, or when we carry out training programs on first aid and primary care for community health volunteers. When we advocate for issues before government officials and private funders. When we try to mediate between conflicts. We also need to be good communicators both in the oral and written form. A community health worker, therefore, is given multiple opportunities to develop himself or herself as a teacher and as a health educator. With these skills, a community health worker and professional can readily find himself or herself taking on a more formal role of being a teacher in an educational institution, school, or academic setting. And many of us here take on this role, many quite naturally. Okay? There is a sense of generativity in teaching. Okay? We impart what we value to others. We impart these values so that in turn we can live in others, and by doing so, ensure that we can do or we can continue beyond ourselves, that our ideas can continue beyond ourselves. One of the biggest joy that I have as a teacher is seeing that eureka moment, no? When a student gets it, not the plain recall of a concept or answer, but the understanding in mind and heart of an idea. And hopefully, this idea can be translated into action by the student. Here, also, we talk about teaching in the way we live our life, in the culture we carry. In academic parlance, we refer to this as the hidden curriculum. And in the way we teach through our action. So it is not just what we say or what we preach at the very top of our voice, but it is also in what we do and how we carry ourselves. Here lies the theme of teaching as a vocation that Doc Lopao talked about last month. Not only is it a vocation or a mission, I would venture to say that because we have been recipient of the love of our teachers, we are compelled to give this back, to share this love to others so that others learn the way we have learned from others. Interestingly, I believe that teaching about community health is also serving the goals of community health. It is unfortunate that more than 4 decades after the Declaration of Health for All, as the battle cry for primary health care in the World Health Assembly in Alma Ata, we are nowhere close to achieving this goal. I maintain that this is one important reason why we are teaching community health. We hope and pray that our students can learn a lot from us, and so that they can take on the cudgels of achieving this advocacy. Teaching then is both an opportunity and a challenge. It is an opportunity. We have a captive audience of students with malleable hearts and mind who can be formed to go through a unique experience on community health the way we ourselves went through them during our formative years. As a challenge, especially amongst these digital natives, we have to be very creative in structuring and organizing this experience. We have one golden chance to make this compelling, and perhaps we can draw on our own experience to make this encounter a lot more meaningful to our students. Now, returning now to our theme of leading others, serving communities, I hope that the preceding discourse have convinced you that when we speak about service, we refer to both doing community health and teaching community health. And maybe we can even be bolder by saying that community health and teaching community health, doing community health and teaching community health are inseparable. This segues to our next reflection session. Okay? We asked ourselves earlier the question of who we are as a group. Now, let me ask now a second question on the theme of service. And I believe it is an important question to confront. Why do we serve? And what do we do? Or why do we do what we are doing? So, why do we serve? And why do we do what we are doing? Let's briefly reflect on that. And those of you who are disposed to type your answers in the chat box, you can do so and share it with the group. Okay? When we ask this question, it is in fact a question on motivation. No? So, to paraphrase a few lines from Pedro Arrupe, we ask ourselves, what will get us out of bed in the morning? Okay. What will we do with our evenings? And how will we spend our weekends? These are questions that also ask about why we do what we are doing. What is that motivating force that makes us move forward and that makes us act? Let me propose some answers. No? So perhaps some provocative, but deliberately posted here so that we can get ourselves to reflect on our motivations. And I invite you to ponder on them yourself. Okay? Am I doing this work for personal gain? Okay? Sounds simple enough, but quite a difficult question to answer, or to at least answer honestly. Am I doing it for money? Maybe a lot of you are asking money in community health, okay? Indeed, while we can be extremely rich in friendship and camaraderie and rich in rewards of the heart, community health will not make us rich. Unless, of course, one is headquartered in the fancy offices of international development agencies and proclaim that you work in community health. Okay? It is, however, I believe, a valid question to ask ourselves. No? Maybe not about getting rich while doing community health, but rather doing the work simply for the pay. Am I doing this work only for my bi-monthly paycheck? Is it my only motivation? It is a necessity to earn and a decent right at that to be paid for an honest work. But is it my only motivation? Maybe not. Maybe we have stories to tell of the many instances when we had turned down job offers that are higher paying. Maybe we pride ourselves in saying that we have had the sacrifice to stay on, or we've made the sacrifice to stay on, forgoing opportunities that are financially lucrative, all for our commitment to do the work we are currently doing right now. That's very well and good and laudable indeed. But let us challenge ourselves with the second question. Am I doing this work for power? Am I here for the personal gain of being able to exercise authority over my coworkers or even over the people who I serve? Is it the stature that I am after? Is this the gain that I'm getting from my work? How much of this personal gain is serving as my motivation? Do I crave for the adulation that people in the community give me? Do I bash in the different awards and citations that come my way to the point that they are now my motivations? Am I awash in the popularity that work has given me? Power and popularity. These are not inherently wicked desires. Used properly, they can be extremely effective in achieving our goals, but they can be intoxicating. And it matters that we ask ourselves these questions because many times we may not be conscious of these yearnings. And because we are unaware, we can get intoxicated by them. Sa Pilipino, pera, puder, popularidad. Mahahalagang tanong para sa ating lahat upang mapagmuni-munian ang pangalawang tema na ating binanggit kanina. Bakit nga ba ako nagpapatuloy sa aking ginagawa ngayon bilang community health worker at bilang guro sa community health? Mahalagang masuri ang ating pinanggagalingan at ang ating motibo upang tahakan nating masagot ang tanong kung paano tayo makapagpapatuloy sa ating paglilingkod. Mahalaga ang tapat na pagsusuri sa ating sarili, ang kakayahang humarap sa salamin upang may kababaang loob na tanggapin ang totoong sagot sa mga tunay na dahilan ng ating pagkilos. Mungkahi ko na sagutin ang mga sumusunod na tanong bilang unang hakbang sa pagsagot natin sa katanungan ukol sa motibo sa paglilingkod. Sino ba ang iniinugan ng aking pagkilos? Sino ba ang sentro ng aking paglilingkod? Ako ba o ang aking kapwa? Mahalaga ang katanungang ito at mangangahas akong sabihin na mahihirapan tayong magpatuloy sa paglilingkod kung ang sentro ng ating pagkilos ay ang ating sarili. Maaaring magsimula sa ganitong makasariling dahilan. Ngunit upang magbunga ng marami at upang manatili ang pag-aalab na makatulong sa iba, makakatulong na ang iniinugan ng ating pagkilos ay ang ating kapwa. At ang ating hangarin ay ang maging tao para sa kapwa. Harinawa, nagpapatuloy ang ating pagkahubog sa paraang unti-unti nating isinaisang tabi ang sarili at iginigitna ang iba. Nakatulong sana sa atin ang mga nakaraang session ng NILAY, lalo na ang session sa kamalayan sa sarili, self-awareness, at ang session sa pamumuno at espiritualidad, leadership and spirituality, upang bunuin ang pag-aalay ng sarili para sa kapwa. Sa isang banda, hindi mahirap na makitang ang mukha ng iba sa ating mga ginagawa. Dumaan tayo sa maraming karanasan upang matuklasan ang tunay na kalagayan ng mga Pilipino, lalo na ang mga nangangailangan. Ang kanilang kahirapan ay di lamang mga datos o estatistika, subalit tunay na mga taong may ating mga nakasalamuha, nakahuntahan, nakahalakhakan, naringgan ng mga kwento ng kanilang pakikibaka. Nauunawaan natin ang kanilang kalagayan at ito ang nag-uudyok sa atin na sabayan sila sa kanilang mga pagkilos upang maiangat ang kanilang karangalan at dignidad bilang mga tao. Gagap natin ang malaking pagsubok na kanilang hinaharap. Bunga ng ganitong pag-unawa, dala ng ating awa at pagkahabag sa iba, madaling sabihin na ang kapwa nga ang iniinugan ng ating paglilingkod. At para sa marami, ito ang lakas na nagtutulak sa ating maglingkod sa iba. Mahalagang tumagos sa ating kalooban at sa ating puso ang pagkahabag sa kapwa. Mahalagang maramdam natin ang kanilang nararamdaman. Mahalagang mabagabag tayo sa hirap na kanilang pinagdaraanan. Sa ganitong paraan, lamang natin maitutulak ang ating sarili na kumilos at gumalaw para sa kapakanan ng iba. Kung hindi maantig ang ating damdamin, hindi tayo kikilos. At ito ang mahalagang hantungan ng ating pagkabalisa, ang pagkilos. Kung walang pagkilos, kahit na nararamdaman natin ang kanilang nararamdaman, mananatili tayong bahagi lamang ng madlang parang bagang nanonood lamang sa telebisyon o sa mga sinehan. Maaring naiiyak sa nakikita, ngunit nakakalimot pagkatapos ng palabas. Sa madaling salita, mahalagang hindi tayo manatili sa pagkahabag o pagkaawa sa iba. Rito nagsisimula, mahalagang maramdaman natin, ngunit mahalagang mag-usad ito sa ating pagkilos. Mahalaga kung gayon na ang ating pagkahabag ay magbunsod sa atin sa susunod na hakbang ng pagkilos. Ngunit anong kilos? Anong galaw? Rito pumapasok ang susunod na hakbang, ang malalim na pagsusuri sa kalagayang nakikita upang ating matukoy kung ano ang ating gagawin. Upang tunay na makatulong, taimtim nating suriin ang balangkas ng lipunan upang matunton ang ugat ng kahirapan. Gamitin ang samut-saring kasangkapan sa pagsusuri ng lipunan at halawin dito ang anyo ng pagkilos na ating gagalawan. Hindi lamang bugso ng damdamin, dapwat malalim na pag-unawa sa dahilan kung bakit nating gagawin ang ating gagawin. Isa sa mga itinuturo kong paradigma sa pagbabago ay ang balangkas ng social determinants of healthcare. Malalim at malawak ang saklaw, komplikado, kabilang ang lahat ng struktura ng lipunan. Kung minsan, nagtatanong ang aking mga estudyante, "Sir, wala po bang mas simple?" At ang sagot ko ay ito, ang usaping kalusugan ng ating bayan ay masalimuot. Sa wikang Ingles, wicked. At dahil ang usaping ito ay para bagang buktot na halimaw, Nangangailangan ito ng angkop na instrumento ng pagsusuri na makapagtuturo sa ating bumuo ng mga sandatang matulis at matalas. Ang malalim na pagsusuri ba ang huling hakbang bago ang pagkilos? Matapos ang pandama, matapos ang pagdidesisyong kumilos, ito ba ang huli? Para sa iba, sapat na marahil ito. No? Kailangan ng gumalaw. Analysis, paralysis, ika nga. Magmumungkahi ako na mayroon pang isang hakbang. Ang muling pagninilay. Tulad ng pamagat ng ating serye nitong nakaraang 5 buwan. Pagninilay, pagbababad, pagdanas, pagkahabag, pagkilos, pagsisiyasat, at pagnilinay na muli. Muling pag-isipan, muling pagmuni-munihan. Tanungin muli ang sarili. Balikan ang unang tanong natin kanina. Para kanino ang kilos na ito? Sino ang sentro sa pagkilos na ito? Humanap ng kumpirmasyon sa mga sagot na ating nang naitala. Mahalaga ang hakbang na ito bilang isang muling pagsusulit sa ating sarili, bilang isang eksamen. Kung minsan, sa sidhi ng ating pagnanais na maglingkod sa iba, sa lalim ng ating pagkilatis at pag-aaral, maaari tayong mabilanggo sa mga konsepto at teorya ng pagbabago. Maaari tayong makulong sa mga balangkas ng ideolohiya at maaaring hindi natin ito mapansin. Para sa aking kapwa, pangaba ang aking ginagawa at gagawin? O para na sa aking sariling pagkilatis? O para na sa mga ideyang kasangkapan lamang sana sa pag-unawa? Ang nabubuo ko bang paninindigan para sa tao, para sa bayan, ay paninindigan ng lahat o sa akin lamang? Imumungkahi ko na sagutin ang mga tanong ng muling pagsusuri o eksamen ng hindi nag-iisa. Sagutin na kasama ang iba. Angkop na tulay ang mga tanong na ito sa pangatlong bahagi ng ating pagninilay. Ang pagpapanatili sa pagdilingkod. Sustaining service. One of the things we need to accept about ourselves, perhaps part of the very fabric of our humanity, is that we vacillate between the self and then the other. We are not naturally self-centered, but we can be. And we are also not purely other-centered, no matter how much we claim. If we are, we no longer are human, but divine. This is the reason why we need to challenge ourselves regularly, even daily. Here, the skills of self-reflection come to fore. The better practice, in fact, is the examination of our daily thoughts, feelings, and actions. What we are thinking, how we are feeling, how we are acting. Reviewing this regularly, daily, as though we were sitting by the banks of a stream and letting the day unfold before us, that's the key. Reviewing, examining, asking if what we think, feel, and do is about being other person oriented. If we continue to move towards that disposition, if we continue being part of something bigger than ourselves and not being full of ourselves, we remember that we can be conceited, that we can be prideful. There are two things that can help us from falling to this trap. First is continuous grounding, continuously experiencing the lives of people in the community, continuously experiencing the front lines. By doing this, we naturally get to listen to the prevailing realities and get to listen to voices other than our own. A famous religious leader declares, facts are more important than ideas. Facts inform ideas. Ideas do not dictate facts. The second guide is related to the first. Before embarking on what we want to do or what our analysis is telling us what to do, consider the alternative. Even consider the opposite. Consider other paths. Think about taking another path. This can be done for the simplest or most complicated of actions. If we are thinking of giving a student a failing mark, for example, in family and community health, we ask ourselves, what are the other alternatives? If we are embarking on, as our collective action dictates, on a community mobilization against a local government official, we ask ourselves, what are the other paths? It is amazing how this process develops a more keen consciousness in us, a process of contemplating our actions. We know that we need to act, we need to do something, but we consciously test it against the genuineness of our purpose. What we have described previously are ways of sustaining that we can do by ourselves. We can sustain our desire by being part of a community and by doing our action in groups. Here, we distinguish two levels of a community. First is the community we work for or work in. That is where we need to be continuously immersed. The second is the community that we work with. And here, we talk about our co-workers, our co-venturers. It is an awfully lonely quest if we are working on our own. And it doesn't need to be. Magandang gamitin dito ang imahe ng walis tingting gamit sa paglilinis, pagwawalis. Kung iilang piraso lang, hindi makalinis ng mabuti, nababali, napuputol. Subalit kung isa siyang bugkos, higit na nakalilinis, matibay, at ang kanyang tibay sa katunayan ay dala ng lakas at husay ng pagkakabugkos-bugkos. May araw tayong mapupulot rito. Upang maging mabisa sa pagkilos, mahalagang ayusin ang pagkakabugkos-bugkos natin bilang magkakatuwang sa paggawa. Ibig sabihin, kailangan paglaanan din ng panahon. Hindi lamang ang komunidad o ang pamayanang pinaglilingkuran ang paglalaanan ng panahon, pati rin ang komunidad ng mga magkakasama sa paggawa. Naroroon ang ating lakas at kapag tayo'y may lakas, higit tayong mabisa. Ang mga natutunan natin tungkol sa self-care, self-compassion, sa stress management, sa mental health, no? Huwag nating isiping ang mga gawain ito ay para bagang makasarili. Maaaring magsabi ang iba na sa halip na gugulin ko ang oras para rito, huwag na lang. Gagamitin ko na lang ang panahon upang patuloy na maglingkod, tumingin ng mga may sakit, sumama sa picket line, makipagpulong sa mga funding agency, tulad ng nag-iisang tinting. Maaaring gawin ang mga ito, subalit mabilis tayong mauupos, mababali at mapuputol. Kailangan nating paglaanan ng panahon na kasama ang isa't isa. Sa gayong paraan, masisinop natin ang pagkabigkis sa isa't isa. Titibay tayo, lalakas, at lalong magiging mabisa. Okay. Natutuwa ako at idinaraos natin itong serye ng NILAY sa Pascom. Mahalaga na palakasin natin ang ating samahan upang maipagpatuloy ang ating advokasya sa pagpapahalaga at pagpapalaganap sa community medicine sa iba't ibang paaralan. Sa usapin ng kalusugang pangkahalatan o universal healthcare, lalong tumitingkad ang pangangailangang maiusad ang primary healthcare at community health. Mahalagang manguna ang Pascom dito. Sa pagdaraos ng NILAY, kinikilala rin natin ang pagpapalakas sa ating sarili sa piling ng isa't isa. Nagsisimula tayong bumuo ng komunidad na mapagkalinga at mapag-aruga. Hindi lamang sa ating tinutulungan, pati rin sa atin na magkakasama sa paggawa. At sinisimulan natin ito sa paniniwalang magagawa natin ng sabayan ang paglilingkod sa kapwa at pag-aalaga sa sarili. At nang sa gayon, higit tayong magiging mabisa bilang mga tagapagturo sa medisina, mga manggagawang pangkalusugan, at mga mag-aaral sa kalusugan. Okay. Magandang hapon sa inyong lahat at mabuhay ang Pascom.